Well, hello there, and welcome to A Film a Day with me, Jordan Woodley. M. Night Shyamalan. What a terrifying career he has had. Like almost everyone on the world, I feel like M. Night Shyamalan is sort of the mark, possibly, of sort of the decline of the celebrity director. That his, rising star was during that period where we were still trying to bank films based on who was directing them and which star power was behind it. But as sometimes these things go, this was the decline, at least a declining period in which we still have big directors where you go, oh, this name, carries some weight and we want to see the next blah blah film. But I feel like there was something about the 90s specifically where that was really prominent into the noughties. And then, like I say, the celebrity director, it's not as prominent as it was. Now, unfortunately, I do think that M. Night Shyamalan was a victim of his own success, because I, to this day, think Unbreakable and Sixth Sense are two fantastic debut features. Unbreakable being a debut feature, and then Sixth Sense being the film that brought him into prominence. But his career possibly escalated just that bit too quickly, and so people started to put together their own ideas of what makes an M. Night Shyamalan film. Of course, famously, the twist ending became a staple of his, even though it's very possible that was a consequence of his star rising too quickly, and of course both his first two films having twist endings. But that doesn't necessarily mean, as a director, that was what he wanted to always do. It was just, that's sort of what people began to expect of him. And so you get to that point where, of course, people, you have Signs, which is okay, and The Village, which is horrendous, and Lady in the Water, which is, it's abominable. It's even worse than horrendous, and so unfortunately you do see him taking knock after knock after knock. So it was quite nice when he came back with, which one did he come back with? The Visit, I think, was the first one. And actually, The Visit is a really bare bones, back to basics, found footage, thriller, horror. I mean, it is a horror, broadly speaking, a horror, but it's more within the sort of wheelhouse of M. Night Shyamalan's horror, rather than being something like a Hereditary. And then, of course, he did Split, which is genuinely a great film. And as I say, this was a real return to form, a real sense of, oh, you know what? Decades have passed. This director's been able to shake off his reputation of decades gone by and sort of redefine himself. And then you had Glass, which admittedly I didn't see, and of course ties up the Unbreakable Unbreakable Split trilogy. But I've heard not so great things about it, in spite of James McAvoy really giving it his all, and Samuel L. Jackson and Bruce Willis being there, and it's just, it just wasn't a particularly well-received film, purportedly. Again, haven't seen it. And then we have Old. And Old is a curious film. Looking back at M. Night Shyamalan's career, it almost feels like it demonstrates the best and worst of his oeuvre, I suppose. Because, I don't know, there's something about it where you go, okay, at its core, I do think this is a really fascinating film, and there are excellent things in amongst it. But there's something about the way that M. Night Shyamalan approaches characters and dialogue and plot beats that's almost it feels almost like one of those so bad it's good films that I've harped on about over the recent weeks and months. That some of the habits that they have in the way that they direct, in the way that they edit, in certain decisions they make with the plotting, M. Night Shyamalan does sort of demonstrate those same strange habits. And it definitely comes across in the performances sometimes. I mean, you do have a pretty good casting. I mean, you've got Gail Garcia Bernal, you've got Alex Wolff, of course, who in Hereditary is just... That's why I brought it up earlier. Alex Wolff in Hereditary is genuinely phenomenal. Hereditary is a genuinely phenomenal horror. And you've got a pretty decent cast, broadly speaking, and it's a nice, contained story. You know, you've got the setup where this family arrive in this resort, and the resort seems very normal, very welcoming, very sort of elegant, and then immediately you pick up on the strange dialogue. I mean, Shyamalan is so weird with his dialogue. And sometimes there are certain films where no problem at all. Films like Split or The Sixth Sense, where everything seems normal. Performances, and I don't know if it's the quality of the actors, or the fact that Glass really only has 2 or 3 characters in it, or even the Trip, which again has 4 characters and 5 characters in it, and seems to manage the dialogue better, because here, again, this is like the strange hallmarks you saw in things like The Happening, where people just don't talk like humans. Sometimes it makes you think, is Shyamalan... Is he an alien who sort of understands how humans work, and yet doesn't quite understand, hasn't quite got down, the elements of human speech and interaction? Because it's so strange. From the off, it's so strange how people act in this. I mean, I've read criticisms of the kids' performances, because they do this really weird thing where they keep going up to all the adults around them saying, "What's your name and what's your occupation?" And obviously that is a poor plotting mechanic to establish who everyone is and how they'll be useful to the plot. And it's really bad, it's very lazy. But people, and just some of the other things with the kids, people have gone, oh, when the kids are children, they aren't good, and I don't have a problem with them. In fact, I think children with M. Night Shyamalan's dialogue work better, because realistically, children do have this strange, inconsistent way of speaking. Because again, these are 6-year-olds, and they haven't quite they know how to speak and how to communicate, but they hear things and they misunderstand things, and they use words they don't fully understand, or concepts that they haven't quite got their head around, in a way that sometimes speaking to a child is like speaking to an alien. And they can switch from being incredibly silly and sort of bouncing around to deadly serious in a drop of a hat. And so to me, that they were fine. It's the adults who work off against them, and you could make the case that, oh, come on, some of these adults are humouring these children, so when they come up and say, "What's your name and what's your occupation?" and the adults almost mechanically say, "Well, my name is such and such and I'm a chef, and my name is such and such and I'm a police officer, and my name is such and such, I'm a..." You think, well, maybe that's just them humouring the children, that's sort of them playing up to these children, because, why not? But then there are just weird ways in which people speak, and good actors, your leading couple, the parents of the 2 kids, Guy and Crystal, some of their conversations between the 2 of them are really, really strange. And I think I've sort of got it down in this film, at least, to the fact that Shyamalan wants so desperately to lay out all the necessary elements for the plot, that he doesn't quite know how to sort of establish things and do things like subtle foreshadowing and, naturally weaving in certain elements of things. And so, for instance, the people, when they arrive, the parents talking to the kids are saying, "Oh, you know, you've got a beautiful voice. I can't wait until you're older, or oh, you know, you'll understand such and such when you're older. Or when they're talking to each other, and the wife, you know, Crystal says to Guy, oh, you're always looking to the future, and Guy's like, oh, you're always looking to the past. And yeah, you can tell that it's like, okay, I get it. I already know, I've seen the trailer, I get that this is about people going to a beach and aging at an accelerated rate, but you are not being subtle here. You're not even trying to be subtle. This is just laying your cards out. And so the first 20 minutes, maybe not that long, it's not a particularly long film, actually, so the first 15 minutes maybe, thematically everything is like, it's quite clear that M. Night Shyamalan is turning around and going, these are the themes and the character arcs that I want you to notice, because these will be really important later. And it's like, oh, okay. But then he does it again and again and again, and you're like, I get it. You could just very simply just have characters be characters, and we'll interpret arcs and themes. But sure, just tell us what they are. Why not? So you get this group of people on the beach, and again, it's nice because it's contained. You know, you've got probably about 12, 14 people all together, one centralised location. And again, this is the hallmark of how Shyamalan is not a so bad it's good type director, because the cinematography-wise, he's excellent. The cinematography of this is really unsettling. You know, there are certain movements that the camera makes that really just, you know, throw you off, because you're not expecting the camera to sort of move in the way that it does, or to sort of pull or focus on certain things that you think, oh, it's quite jarring, but like artfully done, so that you get that sense of, oh, I am supposed to be unsettled. And again, the dialogue, for how weird it is, plays into that. It really, you get that sense of, you know, maybe the dialogue in some degree is also supposed to unsettle you, potentially. So once they're on the island, of course, things go supernatural and weird, and of course we're jumping into a M. Night Shyamalan horror, a proper one, you know, where, you know, there are dead characters are dying quickly. Like, you've got at least 2 deaths fairly early on, 2 bodies fairly early on. You're also introduced to a character with the strangest name. I've already forgotten it. Something like MC Mediocre Cadillac or something. And obviously that's like his hip-hop name. And again, it's a strange thing, Shyamalan, who's really become quite obsessed with hip-hop and sort of putting something hip-hop related into his films, of course, throwing back to The Trip and that. But no, he's good. He's a good character and he's interesting. You know, sort of the way he sort of doesn't want to be there, and the way he plays off against certain members of the party who, you know, don't trust him. And then, of course, you notice that the children, of course, being the indicators of what's going on, age very quickly. And again, it is quite disturbing the way that it, you know, you see the changes. And then you get into the sort of the broad strokes of the film, and it becomes, you know, they discover they can't leave, because if they try to go up to the path off the beach, they sort of lose consciousness, and you know, there is an explanation. It's like, oh, that is quite interesting. And you have this group of people who are all sort of trying to piece it together, and you have things like, oh, people gain injuries like slashes, but heal immediately. And so yeah, you've got this dynamic, and again, you've still got the weird Shyamalan dialogue, and the way that characters act so strangely, and not intentionally, not for a supernatural reason, just because you can't help but just put weirdness into his films. People acting or delivering lines in a weird way. And some actors can carry it off, I think, but some, really, you just think, oh, what is your deal? Why are you giving the line? So again, it's the Mark Wahlberg happening thing. It's like you have actors in this film who are entirely that, and you think, oh dear. But like I say, it is an interesting concept. It's apparently based on a French graphic novel, so it's got a good base to it. It's quite clear that he was inspired by reading this and really wanted to tell, because it is an interesting idea, and it goes to some really weird places. I mean, especially like when the kids start to get older, and you get that sense of, oh no, they still have the minds of 6-year-olds, but they are now developing adult bodies, and weird stuff starts to happen. Really strange and weird things start to happen. Or, and initially it's supposed to be cerebral and psychological, with a sense of certain characters cracking under the pressure. And then it goes into sort of more of a body horror kind of situation. And it's kind of weird. It gets very weird. But to be honest, by the time you get to the second, third act of the film, frankly, I'm really engaged. Really engaged. In spite of all the Shyamalan weirdness, I'm interested to see what is going on, and of course I have theories about it, which is mostly correct. And you actually do care about several of the characters, so when people start dropping off one by one, you think, oh god, I hope this person isn't going to go. And of course, you get to the sort of ending, and I won't spoil the ending, but the one thing that irked me more than the weird acting, writing, directing choices that exist in the film, it does that thing in horror where it decides to very distinctly explain what is going on, which I hate. It even has a character saying, as you know. He actually says the line, as you know, which is frustrating. And then, and even that I don't mind too much, because the explanation is interesting for why they're there, what the function is, why they've been sort of put in this situation. It's interesting enough. It actually is, the explanation is, and then the film keeps going. And you think, and I wish the film had been about 5 or 10 minutes earlier. There's a point where, and I can give the line, because I don't think it gives away but the point in which I think the film should have ended is when a character that you don't see goes up to another character and says, you're a police officer, right? And I feel like the film should have cut at that moment. Unfortunately it doesn't, and it keeps going, and then it unpacks everything, and you go, okay, wow, so that all the mystique... there is still theoretical mystique in it, but it's mostly explained, and it's a shame. It really is a shame, because I think the core idea is really interesting and quite cool. But, yeah, this is a weird one, because you can see the visionary nature of Shyamalan from his early, from Unbreakable, from Sixth Sense. You get that sense of ambition, and that sense of, he clearly has a really cool idea that he wants to explore and film, and you think, yes, I'm really invested in this. But you just get the weirdness, like Lady in the Water and The Happening, where you're just like, I don't quite get what you think how people work, and, how people sort of present themselves, and how people's jobs work, even. Because, yeah, it's just, there's so much, it's a real mixed bag. It's not his worst. I actually do think this is pretty interesting. It's just not one of his best, because, I don't know, Bad Habits Die Hard, or maybe he wanted to make this strange written film. I don't know. It is definitely slipped backwards compared to Split and The Trip, which I think are pretty good, are pretty well made films. And I think I didn't hate it. I hope going forwards he sort of doesn't keep doing that, because again he'll once again develop that reputation, and I think it's a shame, because I do think he's a really good director, but mixed bag. Worth watching, I would say. And I saw this in cinema again, and this is probably the first cinema trip I've been to where I've come out going, not so sure about this one. Well, since obviously the easing of the lockdowns, but yeah, this is definitely my first cinema viewing where I've just gone, I'm not sure whether this quite worked. Anyway, thank you for joining me. If you like this video, hit the like button, comment below, and share the video, because that's all helped me in the algorithm. Subscribe to the channel and hit that little bell to get notifications of when new videos are uploaded. Check out my back catalogue of over 200 videos, and follow me on Twitter at Jordan_Woodley, where I tweet about films, TV shows, and I share these videos once they're uploaded to YouTube, either the day of or the day after. Thank you for joining me. Take care.